Well, this week I revealed that our top intelligence chiefs have been dumped as permanent members of the National Security Committee of Cabinet. And today, Shadow Home Affairs Minister James Paterson asked Foreign Minister Penny Wong about why this had happened during question time in the Senate.
Can you confirm reports that the government has removed the Directors General of ASIO and ASIS as regular attendees at the National Security Committee of Cabinet and that they are now only invited on a case-by-case basis?
We don't disclose the workings of the National Security Committee of Cabinet.
Can you confirm reports that the Secretary of the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water is now a regular attendee of the National Security Committee? Why does the government think that he has superior insights on national security to the Director-Generals of ASIO and ASIS?
We don't comment on the workings of those committees, but I would say to you I had never heard that before until you raised it.
Joining me now is the former head of the China desk at the Defence Intelligence Organisation, Paul Monk. Paul, thank you very much for your time. Look, Penny Wong couldn't find a legitimate reason to say why the boss of ASIO and ASIS, the Director Generals of ASIO and ASIS, are no longer permanent members of the National Security Committee of Cabinet. Instead, in a comment that we didn't play just there, she resorted to attacking James Paterson for even asking the question.
Yeah, and I've got to say, as a long-time analyst of national security affairs and as an old China hand, I'm deeply disturbed by this development, as with other things that have gone along with it, as you well know and as you pointed out earlier in the week. And I've got to be really, as it were, brutally frank in saying, if I was, as it were, to lead a coalition government into office tomorrow, the first order of business would be to reverse the decisions that have been made. I would sack Glyn Davis, frankly. I would give Peter Varghese his marching orders. And if any think tank is to be defunded on the basis that it's not contributing usefully to national security, it'd be AsiaLink, certainly not ASPI, which under Peter Jennings' leadership over a period of years became the only really serious think tank on national security affairs in this country.
Yep. So just to explain to everyone at home what you were just speaking about there, Glyn Davis heads the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. It's said to have been his decision to not have the Director Generals of ASIO, Mike Burgess, and ASIS, Kerri, Hartland, as permanent members of the National Security Committee of Cabinet. Instead, they're invited in on a case-by-case basis. Glyn Davis is a distinguished public servant, but he does have a history of ties to China. He was on the Daniel Andrews trip to Beijing when Daniel Andrews first signed the Belt and Road Initiative with the Communist Party back in around 2014, 2015. He's been a university professor. He isn't known as a national security hawk, Paul Monk.
To say the very least. And what needs to be made clear in this context is the Albanese government came into office touting its national security bipartisan credentials as regards AUKUS, as regards the Quad. What we've seen since then is a slow sliding away from concrete commitments. And now it seems to me what we're seeing is an undermining of that strategic position. If the government was serious about those commitments which Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese stood up for in the first day they were in office, what we'd be seeing is Glyn Davis not removing the heads of the security and secret intelligence services from the National Security Committee of Cabinet or defunding ASPI. They'd be saying we need to double down on funding ASPI precisely because it's close to the United States, it's serious in its analysis and it's critical of China. Because our problem is China. We want to manage that well, but to defund ASPI and to remove those guys or individuals, the intelligence chiefs from the National Security Committee of Cabinet, is to say the very least sending the wrong signals to China, and it's sending alarming signals to those of us who take national security seriously.
Exactly. Well, we have those comments now where Penny Wong criticised James Paterson for even asking the question. Let's have a look.
Did the Prime Minister remove the heads of our intelligence agencies from NSC because they were telling him things he didn't want to hear? And will the Prime Minister commit to reinstating the heads of our intelligence agencies as regular attendees of NSC so they can provide the candid and considered national security advice that this government so desperately needs to hear?
He's generally one of the more sensible members of the opposition and somebody who understands the importance of working together on national security, and frankly that question is beneath him.
Well, that's not right. That question's not beneath him. That is a vitally important question. The public needs to know why Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese, Glyn Davis, this entire left-wing socialist government has removed the two most important voices on national security from the premier body that advises the government on the urgent threats to our security. I mean, it's just not good enough that there's no public explanation for this since we revealed it on Monday night's show.
I fully agree. And it seems to me that if the government is to be taken seriously by voters concerned with national security, it must account for these moves in a way that is in fact credible. And we both know that there are other issues, you've pointed them out on air, in which decisions by this government and commitments by the Foreign Minister raise serious questions about its priorities and its clarity of thought on matters of international security. So, I think there's some serious work to be done, and I think James Paterson is doing the country a great service in raising these questions. I think it's dismaying that the Foreign Minister would dismiss them so glibly.
Exactly. I should just point out to viewers, Paul Monk, that you are not a coalition figure at all.
No, I don't belong to any political party. When described by some people as, and I quote an old friend, as an extreme right-winger, I've said, I don't know why you would categorise me that way. If I'm to be typecast ideologically at all, I would say I'm a John Stuart Mill liberal, and Mill was no one's idea of an extreme right-winger. He was a radical reformer and a very serious thinker. I'd like to think of myself that way.
And you are indeed a serious thinker and a China expert. Paul Monk, thank you very much for joining me this evening.